Latest on it shortly. Let's get to and Bruce Hawker with us to talk politics of the day and the week. Thank you both very much for joining us. I just want to pick up on this negative gearing argument. Bruce Hawker, to you first on this. It's been such a hot potato or a no-go area for both sides of politics for so many years, even when Labor was in government for some 6 years and the budget was diving into the red. They still wouldn't reach for this lever of negative gearing, but Labor certainly is now, and the government's also looking at it. What do you think about the politics around this? How's this one going to play out?
Well, I think Labor has to make it very clear to investors that existing schemes are going to be grandfathered for a start. It's going to be prospective rather than retrospective. I think that's a very important piece of information that really has to be stressed to stop people panicking about what this may mean for existing investments. Then I think that's a case of arguing and explaining that it's important to apply the negative gearing arrangements to new properties to encourage building and development rather than just working on existing properties, as happens as we now know in 93% of the cases. But even if it does all that
explaining, Bruce, is this still a risky prospect politically for Labor?
Look, I think it demonstrates that Labor has got some serious tax initiatives which it's prepared to take. What's the government come up with? An increase in the GST, which they abandoned as soon as there was any sort of whiff of gunfire or smoke even from their own ranks. I mean, Labor is actually coming out with some policies here, and for a long time they were accused of not having policies. So I think they should be commended for doing it and for starting a serious debate.
Graham, we've seen the government, by varying degrees, ramp up the criticism of what Labor's announced here. Steve Chobo, just a short time ago, reckons this is going to decimate house prices across the market. I guess it's very hard to know what investors will do with this sort of change that Labor's talking about here. The government, meanwhile, is looking at what to do as well with negative gearing. Where do you think the government should really should go with this? How hard should it go on negative gearing rules?
Well, look, it just seemed to me somebody in the Labor Party forgot to ask the question, do we really hate renters? Because that's what they've done. And you say we don't know what's going to happen. We do. We saw roughly this with Paul Keating, and it just kneecapped the metropolitan markets on the eastern states. Sydney just got crippled. If you haven't got mum and dad investors trying to earn a buck with investing in a house over, say, 20 or 30 years, letting somebody else rent it, then the poor old taxpayer or somebody has got to come in and provide all this housing. Who else is going to do it? And as for, say, investing just in new homes, well, that's fine. If every young couple in Australia wants to go to the outskirts of every city and drive for 2.5 hours to their work, it just defies logic what they're doing. I just... and we talk about having jobs and growth. This is a great way. It's a great way.
Here. Let me just ask you this, Graham. We know the budget's in deep trouble and needs all these sort of things to be looked at. And, yes, there are concerns being expressed about what Labor's done here. But what do you think? Should negative gearing be addressed at all, or should it be left untouched?
Well, look, it may well be, now that the GST seems to be off the table, that everyone is going to tweak all sorts of things. Now, I don't think that's terribly wise. I would have kept the GST there and have a whole big bang package that you can go out and sell. And I think this is one of the problems. I've been in Brisbane all day and I am tomorrow just talking to the business community, for example. And everyone's just slightly concerned about what is the story, what is the message. There's no doubt the last couple of weeks have been a bit untidy, but if you look forward, if the big message is not, hey, let's update our tax system, let's modernise our tax system, then you're back on, let's tweak the tax system and do something. And I just think at the moment the last thing the confidence needs in this country and in the business community is a politician mucking around with capital gains tax and negative gearing, and particularly as half the people behind Bill Shorten have already made their money out of capital gains tax.
Well, and negative gearing, I think a lot of politicians on both sides of the aisle. But just to pick up on something you've said, Grahame, this untidiness, this confusion that you've picked up, are you saying the government really needs to get off the pot and actually announce some detail around what it's going to do on tax?
No, but not yet, no. But as we get closer to say, well, the budget you would have to, and then the launch of the election campaign. But somebody like me, who's run a heap of campaigns, it sort of thinks forward and think, okay, what is the message everyone's crafting to talk about in the last few days of election campaign? And I'm pretty sure neither side has got that yet, not even close. So we're sort of, both sides are sort of grappling with what is the story, what is the message, and they're both, Labor has hurt itself with this one, and I think the government hurt itself by just ruling out the GST, because that flexibility for modernisation and change is gone.
Let me just turn to the opinion polls. Bruce, to get your thoughts on this, the Fairfax poll out today in the papers, and you've seen the government lose a little bit of ground in both a two-party preferred result and a little bit for Malcolm Turnbull in terms of preferred Prime Minister as well. In fact, after preferences, it's now a 52-48 lead for the coalition over Labor. Do you think that's about right? Do you detect that's really where things are at nationally?
I think so, because it has been a pretty bad month for the government, and that has not gone unnoticed by the electorate. Ministers have been falling by the wayside, and they've failed to make real calls on things like taxes we're just discussing. And I think now people are starting to ask a bit of a question about Malcolm Turnbull. Is he what he claims to be? Because he seems to stand for certain things, but then when it comes to actually putting deeds where the words are, nothing happens. So, we haven't seen anything on climate change, and he was a great champion of that. Republican movement, he was the leader of that, and there's going to be no change to the monarchy. These are the sorts of things that I think people are saying, well, is he really as authentic as we thought he was? And that will actually have an impact on their voting intentions. Whether Labor can maintain, the good boost that they've received over the Christmas period is another question. Normally it's a time when people normally go to sleep and don't worry too much about politics. If they are starting to focus and they are starting to ask some tough questions about the government and what it's really doing, then some of the gloss will continue to come off them. And
but Bruce, is the flip side of this the prospect that even though the government has had a couple of messy weeks, it's had another ministerial scandal, it's had to reshuffle, it's a bit confused on the tax front, even with all of that, Labor's still behind, and Bill Shorten personally is far behind Malcolm Turnbull. It may not get any better than this for Labor.
Well, it may not, but we hope it'll continue to improve. And I think they've actually demonstrated that they actually can make inroads. And I think there was real question marks around the place before as to whether they could make any inroads into a politician who was really taking that centre ground in politics very aggressively, as Malcolm Turnbull has. But, it's not just a question of talking, it's a question of doing. And if Labor can keep drumming home that message that, Turnbull talks a good story, but he doesn't actually go out and do too much, then I think the electorate will start to become more and more suspicious about what the bona fides of the government are. But let's remember this, they're a first-term government, and it's very hard to toss a first-term government.
Yeah, well, that's true. History shows that. Grahame, would you think perhaps some marginal seat holders in the coalition would be a little nervous about what the polls are showing?
No, not yet, but we are coming back towards somewhere near normal. The honeymoon is almost over, but it's not quite. The sort of blankets have come off and the electorate's got 1 foot out of the bed. But by geez, it's a long way from inviting Bill Shorten into the bedroom.
Well,
there's an image we can contemplate. All right, Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, we're going to have to wrap it up there. But look, thank you both very much for that. We'll see you again next week. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Now.